Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a very early Sunday morning in the beautiful state of Maine. The great weather continues, 70 degrees in the heat of the day, low humidity, cool at night. I think it's 56 out right now. Really nice. So I woke up on the boat, drove home, and I had a 40 spine spool sitting on the porch. I bought it from Quick Performance. I actually bought it on eBay, but they were the ones selling it. And I like that it has dual bolt pattern because this ring gear takes a smaller set of holes, but it's universal. I have a brand new set of bearings I'm going to press on there. I'm going to use this cut down piece of black iron pipe is all it is. I like to push on the center of the bearing right there. So I'll be pushing right there. And the bearing has to sit down lower than the spool. So you can't just push flat on it. One, you'd probably dent the cage and the rollers, especially the cage. The cage is a fragile part. So you need to be able to push on the center of it. That's the trick. You see a lot of people put the race on and then they'll just push on the whole thing. Well, the cage sticks up higher than the race, and when you're pushing on the race, you're putting all the force right there on that part of the inner part of the bearing, the inner race, I suppose. So take that right out of the equation and just push on it just like that, and everything will be good. I'll put the ring gear on afterwards, and to be honest, I like to move this whole process forward really quickly because I Loctite the ring gear bolts. I'm just going to gun them on here in a crisscross pattern, get it set in the housing, then I'm going to torque it in there because that is a lot easier to hold it still than it is to chase this or try to put it in the vise or something. So I guess if you're using this spool all the time, you could have some kind of drive thing that's set on those big holes. I mean, there's lots of ways you could build a tool to do it. I just like to move it along quickly, get the ring gear bolted on, get it chucked up in here, and go ahead and torque the bolts. I don't have to check my depth or anything yet. Just get it somewhere where I can hang on to it. And when you're installing the caps, which of course I mark left and right, you can either set the spanner in here, but either way you want to make sure it spins and adjusts easily. It's very possible to get it wrong, so you want it to spin. And I put a little oil on both sides. And when you put it down in, you can set it in like this, so you can put the spanner in and set the cap down over it in here. But either way, you want it to spin easily and look square before you go ahead and tighten everything up. And I have my adjustable spanner tool that I made. It's nothing but a piece of flat bar. It happens to be stainless, but it is adjustable. So it allows me to use it on different carrier bearing sizes. And excuse my dirty window, but this is the deer I call Limpy. She's a doe. She has two little babies. I'll try to get those on camera as well. Her right front leg has been bad for a few years now. She's been hanging around the yard. Here comes one of the babies. And there's a second one somewhere. I hate to scare her. I'm really careful. The other day it had to be 95 degrees out. I stepped out and I was going to go open one of the metal boxes, storage boxes. I saw her on the other side of the yard. I hate to scare her and make her run because it must be painful for her. So I stood there in the hot sun and let them pass. I'm waiting for the third one to come into the picture. The little ones are cute. They just scamper around. She doesn't pay much attention. She knows when real danger is coming, I guess. So they're gone. I'll get back to working on the rear end. I believe they're eating my acorns, which is fine. They've been falling down on the back deck lately. Sounds like bombs are dropping. I can't resist. Sometimes I'll watch them for 20 minutes, a half an hour. I want to get all three in the picture, but She does not get around well, but she's been getting around like that as long as I've seen her, at least 2 years now, probably more. All right, back to work. To install the second bearing, I had to use a bushing driver underneath. You want to make sure while you're pressing that the rollers in the cage still spin. That way you're not doing any damage to the bearing. So under here is a aluminum bushing driver that happened to fit the hole and spaced it up off the press. So after everything was clean, I put thread locker on all my ring gear bolts. Happens to be red because that was what's on the bench. I think it's a good choice. I'm still sitting on my bushing driver because I don't want to damage the cage because it sits down lower than anything else. This particular spool does not stick through far enough to sit on the actual spool. So I set the spool over the ring gear, hold it up and start the bolts. Flipped it right over. Just kind of gave it a few gentle taps to make sure it was started over the spool. And then carefully drew it on. All I'm using is it's a 1/4 inch nut driver with an adapter for 3/8 socket. So it's not super powerful. It actually does a really good job though. I use this more than I use my 3/8 impact. And just drew it on there nicely. It went right on, no sweat. So now I keep track of the races as to which side they came from or which package they came out of. It doesn't matter. You can buy them separate. They're brand new. They've never been run. But that is just my habit, I guess. So I carefully set everything into the housing. I grab the caps just like this and start the bolts first and set the spanner down into the threads. In this particular case, I haven't found anything wrong with it yet. I love the way it goes together and the way the spanners feel. I have the cap screws, more than finger tight. They're, I ran them down with the same 1/4 inch impact and these still spin nicely. And what I like to establish is both spanners need to be against the bearing races, but I like to start out where I have a lot of backlash and work my way over by having to turn, this one a 1/2 a turn, push it over with this one. So you're always tight. You don't, no preload, but you're moving it over this way. Using my spanner wrench, which works really well. And I stop where it's eventually going to have to line up for the lock every time, just out of habit. Kind of like putting the bearing races on back where they go. That would be relevant if these were used bearings, back to the last frame. So I got it all in here. My backlash by feel with my calibrated hand is probably 6 or 7 thousandths. I need to be 8. Again, sometimes this adjusters are kind of crude. We may not land on exactly 8. But it didn't take me long. I wanted to go around and torque my ring gear bolts. This won't turn. That's as far as it'll go. So now we gotta look for interference. And as often the case, there's too much meat around the tail bearing, the third pinion bearing on a 9-inch Ford. Let me move you over. And if I get a flashlight, we're hitting right there. The ring gear, the corner of the ring gear is hitting the aluminum. So now I gotta drop it all back apart, which fortunately doesn't take very long. Empty out the housing. Grind where it's interfering down here. And this is sadly often the case with all the aftermarket housings. And this is with a spool, so I don't have any clearance problems in here. If I was putting the Detroit locker in here, I'm curious as to how close this would be. I've had to grind all the way around these before, and they gave what they thought was a generous notch there. Not important with the spool, but down here the ring gear doesn't clear, and that is, well, again, not uncommon. But so I'll drop it apart. grind it all up, wash everything, and attempt reassembly again. But my stomach is telling me it's probably time for breakfast. All right, it's the next day, Monday, Labor Day, 2022. I came out and blew it all apart. Did a little grinding down there. As usual, it took way longer to clean up the mess than it did to actually clearance for the ring gear, especially when I'm using my aluminum burr. That thing really chunks off the metal. Now I have reassembled it and marked on the ring gear, etched in, is 0.008 thousandths, which I'll take to be the backlash. Makes sense. And in a stroke of luck, it doesn't always work out this way, because like I mentioned, you have to stop the adjuster to line up with the lock. There's no half, so when I back this one off one set of notches, one set of holes, and tighten the opposite side, that's where I'm at. And it just happened to fall at 8 thousandths. You have to get crafty with the dial indicator because it's aluminum housing. Normally I could stick it anywhere I wanted to, but it's actually stuck on the orange piece. And I'm able to gently rock it back and forth, and I'm recording 8 thousandths. So I've now set the ring and pinion per the dimensions that are written on it. So now let's get some of the gross yellow marking compound and see how it pans out. I try to put a little on a few teeth, get it down by the pinion, and then just hold the ring gear, grab the yoke, and run it back and forth a few times. Welcome back to Murder at the Mustard Factory. Well, this is where it looked originally. And just for kicks, because like I mentioned, you can pop the pinion, the whole rig right in and out without changing the backlash even. And try different shims. So this was okay. That's the coast side, that's the drive. I tried 4 thousandths either direction to see if I could make it better. And it didn't improve it at all. It just moved it up and down on the tooth a little bit. So I guess this is where it's going to live. The jury's still out whether you should just believe the numbers and never look at the pattern. I always look at the pattern even though I don't like the process. It's kind of fun, but it's messy. But in the end, you got to decide. You want to go with what the machine said, as long as you're measuring it correctly, or you just want to throw that away and just go by the pattern. In this case, it'll run. Again, it's a inexpensive ring and pinion. It's a Richmond, but it's their bargain brand. So now I'll clean everything up and preload the bearings. Right now I sit it, each adjuster is tight, but neither one has been moved beyond tight. There's different schools of thought whether you should put all the preload in on one side. I really don't think it matters. I've done it every way possible. I'm just going to move each one to the next hole, which will take a substantial amount of force, and put the lock in. To do that, the cap screws are tight right now. I just break them loose, go ahead and move that, tighten them back up, do the same for the other side. If during the setup process you were struggling to get the proper backlash, you could stop in between the holes. It's not against the rules. And then when you go to preload, you'll just have that much extra preload. But you can, ignore the holes, just put the backlash where you want. I like to do it where it's going to line up. But I do know that there are options, and you could put the backlash any way you wanted. If I sounded like you couldn't, I just like to have the holes line up. Makes more sense, to me anyway. All done. I popped out the whole pinion support, put the O-ring on it, lubed it up, put it back in, Loctited the bolts, torqued the caps, put my locks in for the spanners. After I did my preload, we're done. I'm gonna spray it with some CRC 336. I went to a spray bottle and bought a gallon or so of it because the individual aerosol cans, which always seem to be empty, the price on those is, like everything else, has gone up. So I determined it was cheaper to spray it myself. I seem to get a lot more product that way. So that's the end of my Labor Day. It's odd, the post office, 2 of the vehicles have gone by. It's a holiday, you don't typically see them, but they are so far behind. I mean, they'll say a package is going to be here, for instance, last Wednesday, and it showed up Saturday, so that's pretty good. They keep marking it undeliverable, boxes blocked. Probably the snow. It's September. If you're watching this, it's Labor Day. So anyway, that's it. Did I mention I was going to spray it down with the 336 is a rust preventative. It's kind of like WD-40, but it's made, it actually says it's, long-term rust preventative. So I like to give raw metal a chance because it's going to go down and sit in my buddy's garage for who knows how long. Because this is part of the trade I did for the Harley. So I was going to deliver him a 9-inch Ford center section. And that's it. Hope you got something out of this rambling part 2. And next, well, who knows, but I'll be back in a couple days to do something. Enjoy the rest of the day.